torn your dress. Rebel, rebel, your face is a mess. Hello. Welcome to all our loyal live visitors here at the Blue Boar Tavern, brought to you by the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship as usual. Nice to have you with you. Thank you for coming. Chat amongst yourselves with your chat button at your table there. Hello. I know we have visitors who travel all the way across the world from Germany and Australia and Canada just to be here. So thank you so much. We have our chat, our question and answer buttons. You can click those. We have a guest today. Again, we don't know how many questions we can get to, but chat amongst yourselves. That's wonderful. We love that background chatter. And our guest today has got me wanting to reflect a little bit, doing something different here. Hank Whittemore, probably a lot of you know him. He was an original member of the Blue Boar Tavern when we started almost 2 years ago. Alex, hi, how are you?
Good evening.
I'm talking a little bit about our history here, just because Hank is back. I just want to reflect. We are hanging out here in the after hours, and it struck us how the audience has really changed and expanded here over the last 2 years. And we started just for members of the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship, and August thought it would be nice to have a little feature for members to hang out with other Oxfordians, since hi Bonner, a lot of us tend to feel kind of isolated. Our spouses and friends are sick of hearing about this. So we do, originally 2 years ago, we'd get like 12, 15 viewers here. So then as we got comfortable, we added chatting and questions and more confident in ourselves. And then we broadened it out to the whole Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship mailing list. And that really broadened out last month with Roger Strittmatter as our guest. We hit a record number of live customers coming into the pub here. Hi, Dorothea. About 175 people were here live last month, hanging out with, again, people coming from all over the world. Then, as we got more confident, we thought, let's go out to the world. So we're on YouTube now. So we realized, hanging around the table the other night, that our audience isn't just the diehard Oxfordians anymore. We've got probably a lot more people who don't know who we are, for one thing. Maybe don't know a lot about Oxfordianism, are just interested. YouTube suggests they come look at this video. So I just wanted to address the YouTube audience for a moment. So you YouTubers, you're watching us from the future. We're frozen in time for you here. But I was looking at the YouTube comments. I went through all the episodes of the Blue Boar Tavern and was reading the comments beneath them, which I haven't done before. And I found it really touching, because I hadn't realized how many people out there this is so important to them. And they wait for episodes of the Blue Boar. And for example, one that really struck me was a woman, I don't know her name. She wrote she was an English major. She takes care of her aged parents, takes care of an autistic child, and she looks forward to this. And she says, it's like my oasis of intelligent literary conversation. So that's what we're doing. So thank you so much, all you YouTube viewers. Thank you for our live viewers out there every week, your loyalty. To that woman, if it was up to me, which it will be, I'll say it is, this show tonight's dedicated to you. I hope you're watching this one. And since people may not know who we are, YouTube people, I thought I'd go around and just briefly, before we get to our wonderful guest, talk about who we have here. Alex McNeil. As long as I've been involved with the Oxford movement, there's always been the name Alex McNeil there. You just won the Tom Rainier, or I don't even know how his last name was pronounced, Rainier Veritas Award. He was a wonderful person. You have your Shakespeare Authorship 101 video on our website. Everyone should go watch that. Bonner Miller Cutting, a lifelong Oxfordian, concert pianist, one of the most solid researchers, I think. And if you have any comments to make about each other, I may be forgetting things. Dorothea Dickerman, one of the many lawyers I've met. Alex is one as well, I think, in the Oxford movement. It's amazing how this attracts legal, lawyerly people who, and I know Dorothea goes for primary evidence like a lawyer. to the point of even traveling around Italy in the footsteps of all the Shakespeare plays. Phoebe Neer isn't here. She's our resident cool young person. She's off showing her film at film festivals. But she's a social media whiz, has been noted by the New Yorker, New York Times, and Hank. Now let's bring in Hank because he's a Renaissance man. He's usually called, he was a professional actor on Broadway, even a journalist. Hank has written a wonderful, he has it on his blog, hankwhittemore.com. I hope that's right, Hank. 100 Reasons Shakespeare Was the Earl of Oxford. It's a great, solid site.
Shakespeare blog. Yeah. I've not contributed to it too often lately, but I plan to.
But there's a lot there already.
Sure.
Your recent book, The Living Record, Shakespeare, Succession, and the Sonnets, ties into what we're going to talk about tonight, which is the Essex Rebellion. And Oxfordians, it happened 423 years ago right now. Oxfordians hear about it usually in the context of Richard II being performed, the players were performed to prepare people for the idea of overthrowing a monarch, and the Earl of Southampton being connected.
Did I say insurrection?
We could. But it's a lot more complex than that, and it's more than I know. So it's more than Errol Flynn and Betty Davis. Shelley Maycock pointed out in a thread the other day, what makes it even more complex is what we know about it is written by the winners. So as much of history is. So Hank, you know this period inside and out. You're a great teacher and explainer, I know from experience. So could you tell us, short Cliff Note version, what is the Essex Rebellion? Why is it important? We'll get into the ins and outs and everyone involved. And why is it important to Shakespeare and Oxfordianism? That's where we're heading. So go, take it away.
You got it. It sounds like a great event, an eruption and all. And I wouldn't quite call it that. I would say the effects of it were earth-shaking for the people involved and the people in England. Essex was a great hero, young guy in his 30s, mid-30s. The Earl of Essex was the aging queen's favorite for most of the decade of the 1590s. So here it is, 1601, February, and he is, and we'll get to that, but he is a desperate man. So without all the rest of it, he has got to repair himself, and the only way he can do that is through the monarch, and it's an absolute monarchy. In other words, the Queen Elizabeth I, is close to godlike. She is sacred. She cannot be overruled. She can't. She has the say, and she was his one connection to wealth and everything else. We will talk about Essex living at Essex House, which had originally in his time been Leicester House. And Leicester was Robert Dudley, who was the Queen's lover, and Essex is ultimately his father-in-law. I hope I'm correct on that. And Essex, Robert Devereux, inherited this great house. I'm most impressed by the fact that it had 42 bathrooms. 42 bathrooms. I mean, just the idea of it is amazing.
No way.
Okay, so we have the Queen over here, and she is to the west of Essex House, backs on to the river, the Thames. It fronts on the Strand. The palace is to the west, and it's about 20 minutes away. So if he's going to do something at the palace, he doesn't have far to go, But let's back up for a moment. Just less than 3 years before, in August of 1598, a time when Shakespeare, the name, because we're concerned with that, had been around for 5 years, but only in two places. The dedications on the two narrative poems, Venus and Adonis and Lucrece. Those dedications were both to Henry Wriothesley, or Wriothesley, Earl of Southampton, young guy, and a big devoted follower of Essex. So the plot thickens here. Shakespeare has a connection of some sort with Southampton, but we don't know what. And he, Southampton and Essex, were both wards of the state, of the Queen, and they lived for a time, at least Essex only for a short time, Southampton for a long time, under the roof of William Cecil, Lord Burleigh, who basically ran the country. He certainly was someone that the Queen depended upon. Now the Queen's getting older. It's 1598. We haven't heard from Shakespeare again, only in some plays of his that have come out without the name at this point. And at this point, William Cecil is dying at 79. He calls his son, his second son, Robert Cecil, who's a very short man with a humped back, and he will be cited or thought of as the model for Richard III, a conniving character. Robert Cecil is a smart guy, and he's a chess player. He sees the whole board, all the players in it, and he sees about 5 moves ahead. So William Cecil calls him into his bedside and says, and this is a dying statement to him, I want you to take care for the rightful succession. Now, at this point, James of Scotland, King James, is regarded as the rightful successor. And one thing Shakespeare, we know, is totally concerned with is avoiding civil war over who rules the country and to ensure the proper succession. And so 1598, there's only a few years to go before that crisis is going to hit. The Queen is dying. And Cecil nods and says, that's what I'm going to do. And what he means is that I'm going to ensure the Cecils continue in power behind the throne. They can't get the power on the throne. This is a monarchy, a sacred monarchy. So you have these guys who, in a lot of countries, they're behind the throne, and they have the intelligence, they have the real power, and often they make the difference between a country's survival or not. And Robert Cecil sets out to do his father's bidding, make sure the Cecils are, and Robert Cecil, is the power behind the throne, and to eliminate the Earl of Essex from any contention there. And the two of them, so this begins to be a cat and mouse game starting now between Robert Cecil and that tall, once favorite Earl of Essex. He was still...
The whole thing is centering around a power struggle between the Cecil.
Right.
I think it's even larger than that. I see it as the meritocracy, which is the Cecils and Raleigh pushing up against the aristocracy for who is actually going to be the power behind the throne.
Very, very important insight, and I believe you're correct.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Robert Cecil is like the point of the spear, but he's got a lot of people behind him, including his brother-in-law and Raleigh and Grey, all of whom hate Essex.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how they talk to each other. They certainly don't say, hey, Robert, don't you think meritocracy is much better than aristocracy? I mean, don't think they do it that way. I wish I knew how.
Well, there's one point. I think Raleigh, after the fact, writes Cecil and says, if you are successful in keeping Essex down, your son will live in a better house than his.
Well, there you go.
That's my
upward
quote for
climbing.
that. Yeah.
A lot of it had to do with money, for sure. I never realized that. I mean, but Essex was totally dependent on the Queen for his income. But meanwhile, in 1598, this happened. Okay, so by the end of 1598, Robert Cecil has taken over behind the Queen, and he maneuvers to get Essex to absolutely agree to go to Ireland and put down what has been called the Irish Rebellion.
They're just trying to get him out of the way.
Yeah, to get him out of the way, to cause him to fail. And Essex is quite capable of failing on his own, I might say. He is. I've learned more about Essex before this meeting we're having, and just I don't have a real high opinion of him. I mean, he was certainly popular. He was certainly won some battles and got some fame, Cadiz and a few other places where the islands voyage was not good, but he and Southampton were if nothing against Spain. They dreaded the coming of the Armada again in some form, and so that was largely Essex's personality right there. He's a warrior. He's a man of the military who his men loved him, and off he goes to Ireland. Now, who is he going after? Ireland's rebellion doesn't look like they've taken over the whole thing. They're little enclaves of military guys with guns. And do we have? I don't want to just be on the Irish Rebellion, but Essex goes there in the summer of 1599, and for 2 or 3 months, he's got his army of thousands of people going around the countryside and trying to find a battle,
someone to fight,
find who they can fight, and even in one place he goes to fight, and they all start waving and smiling. Well, the Irish, they're pretty smart, and they realize that it's kind of like Muhammad Ali's rope-a-dope, Don't fight, just let them
run around.
Let them run out of steam. And sure enough, Essex and his people are getting dysentery. They're getting, they don't have enough food. They don't have enough replenishment of any kind. And Cecil is behind there, advising the Queen not to send him this. He's doing too much. He's putting medals on his men. He's advancing the Earl of Southampton to the head. What is it called? The master of the horse, and everything that he does, Cecil conveys to the Queen, and the Queen's getting angrier and angrier
because he's just doing nothing and
wasting
time
he's losing men and horses because of sickness, because of malnutrition, because they're losing their motivation, their confidence. And by 3 months, he's ready to give up. And then the very crafty Hugh O'Neill, the Earl of Tyrone, who is leading this Irish rebellion, he sends word very meekly, if you will, very quietly. And I would like to, it's that sort of thing. Meet you one-on-one and talk about peace. Essex decides he's winning, as usual. Maybe he miscalculated. Maybe the whole thing is great. So he goes to the appointed place, which is a stream, and he and Southampton and just a small amount of his own men up on the hillside look down, and there's Hugh O'Neill, the Earl of Tyrone, on his horse, meekly again, submitting to Essex. Essex goes down. Tyrone is submitting, and he says, I want to just conclude a truce with you. And he lays out these gentle terms that Essex is so happy to be concluding a truce and getting the rebellion over with, because O'Neill's people were, gradually taking over, not with a big explosion, but gradually. And he concluded the truce. He didn't tell the Queen. He didn't send in word. He gave away things. Wherever they were, they would stay in that position. The chess game was where it was, and that's what. And it turns out that O'Neill was well ahead, and Essex was not. And at this point, the Queen went into a rage, ordered him to stay there until doomsday if he had to. But he and Southampton and several others, they decided that this can't be. And their hatred for their hatred for what the Queen was doing. I don't know if they actually hated her. Maybe they did.
Do you think they knew it was Cecil behind it, or Robert Cecil sending him?
I have no inside information, but I would think
you were there.
She's his closest advisor, and she is listening to him, and he is saying, don't believe this guy. This is an outrage. Yeah.
Can I just jump in here? Because a little bit ago, I saw Bonner nodding knowingly.
Oh. I was looking at
when you were talking about Essex's personality, I think, and things, and I just wanted to give you a chance to leap in, Bonner, on any of this.
Sure.
Essex had defied the Queen's orders terribly when he went to Ireland, and of course he didn't have enough troops and everything and horse, as they call them, the cavalries, but we call it today. But he didn't really have enough to subdue the Irish. But that's what she wanted. She wanted to win, and he didn't do it. He makes the truce and tries to make the peace, and then he wasn't supposed to take Southampton. There's something else that made the Queen furious. He wasn't supposed to bring Southampton with him to Ireland, but he did, and because he and Southampton they'd been close for a long time. In fact, at this point, they're married to first cousins. And I say first cousins. Southampton is married to the sister of Essex, so they are first cousins, and so their wives are very close. And it makes all kinds of sense that Essex would want to bring Southampton along, but the Queen was furious about that. And she'd been furious with Southampton from the time he married Elizabeth Vernon, Penelope Devereux's first cousin. And he'd even thrown them into the prison to plead. So they were on bad terms to start with, and bad just went to worse with the Irish.
Exactly.
Essex, of course, turned tail after he made the peace with the Earl of Tyrone, and he raced back with Southampton and I guess a few others, and burst in. He went to one of the Queen's palaces. He found out where she was. I think it was Nonsuch Palace, but I'm not sure now. But he burst.
Nonsuch, yeah.
Okay, Nonsuch, and he burst into her inner chambers where she was getting dressed. She wasn't even up and dressed, and they had a conversation for a while. She initially was so shocked that she was nice to him, but after he left, and he thought that it was going to be on good terms, and he was never going to see her ever again. That was
right. I think she thought he was going to kill her.
And he might. Yeah. Well, at any rate,
pretty pissed off.
But they were both. It was a really bad scene, and it basically put him on the spiral downward that would end up the end of his life in 2 more years, or less than that.
Up to this point, we have these different points of interest. We have Essex Rebellion, we have Shakespeare and Southampton are connected, and then Essex himself is connected. And then we have succession, take care of succession. Well, the plays that come out in 98 and now 99 include Richard II, Richard III, and some of the others, Henry IV, and a lot are about succession. Richard II particularly is about how to do it when there is no, the monarch will not choose a successor and name an heir. So why not just hand over your crown? And you can do that. You have the prerogative. There's a whole wonderful article in the Georgetown Law Review in the 1980s that I don't know how they think the man from Stratford was such a legal mind that he was writing this play to show how the queen could not violate her prerogative or whatever by giving up her throne. You're not supposed to be able to do that. But if I guess if you're the person taking the throne from yourself, that's maybe allowable. I don't know. I'd have to reread the article several times to understand
I have some extra copies of it, and
Do you?
I'll send into our info at Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship. It will go to Earl, who's our president, and he'll relay it to me. And I will send you. I'll put it in the mail. It fits in a nice little envelope. It's easy to do. So just to make that announcement, I'd be more than happy to get it into anybody's hands who would like to read it. It's a fantastic.
It's a great article. Yeah, I've recommended it for some time now.
I've just been passed a question here. It looks like this would be a good time to do it.
Sure.
Question, Hank. How did the Queen know that the terms were so unfavorable to the crown? Did she have agents there among them?
Eventually, they had to be brought on paper to her.
Oh, okay. She just
You
saw what it ended up being and
yeah,
went ballistic.
yeah. She wasn't going to stand for a truce that was made. She said, it's not in effect until I agree with it. And I have to look at the terms. And Essex was very embarrassed at this point and didn't want to do that. So I'm imagining that she got the terms and said, I disagree, and you stay there and get better ones. And that's when he split, and it took 4 days to get all the way back to London and go to Whitehall and then change horses and go to Nonsuch, 10 miles down, and burst in the early morning before the Queen had even put on her makeup and everything. And she was a very terrified elderly woman at that point. And but after Essex returned and cleaned himself up, she was no longer afraid of her life. She knew she had it under control. Now, meanwhile, that unfolded the next year, 1600. Essex went to Essex House. He was confined there, first at one place and then another, because of what this bursting into her bedroom in the early morning, and because of the Irish campaign that was a failure. Can you imagine the Earl of Essex, very proud? He's living in this huge house with the 42 bathrooms, and he's going crazy. He needs, and this is where the money comes in, he needs the tariff money for the farm of sweet wines, they called it. He can impose the tariffs, and that's where he had his fortune. And she had given it to him. And the question was she going to give it again? And it lasted all year. And he really became a little bit crazed during this period. Here he is in this big house. People are coming and going, secretly, whatever. And it's getting toward a rebellion time. It's going to be just months until February 8th. And so all during 1600, there's this terrible decline of the Earl of Essex in terms of, and he's only in his mid-30s, but he's losing his mind, I think. I think he's sweating through his clothes. He's having delusions and nightmares and so on. So the followers of Essex, like Southampton, are getting swept up in this because he's pacing and he's distraught. They're getting distraught. So there's talk of eventually breaking into the palace and getting to see the Queen. They begin to think about meeting and think about strategy. And January of 1601 arrives, and Southampton is riding along with his page and several of his retainers. And I think he's in front of Raleigh's house on the Strand. And Lord Grey, you may have mentioned Lord Grey. He's a big thug of Robert Cecil, who don't forget is the manipulator at this side. I don't know if he sent Grey after him.
Well, I think Southampton and Grey had been dueling with each other.
Yes,
for
yes.
a year or more.
Grey
That's right.
originally attacked Southampton, so this was just one more. It was just one more, and the Queen forbade them, and then they both ended up in the lowlands, and they were going to fight there, and she forbade it, but it was overseas. So those two had been at each other. But I think, something else was going on in the end of December. I mean, just to get the milieu into which these men were placed is that because perhaps of Essex's absorptions and fears, they convinced themselves that Cecil actually was doing business with King Philip III of Spain, and that he wanted to hand over. I mean, this is, I think, what's in their heads is that Cecil gave positions into the north to his half-brother Thomas. He gave the positions in the Cinque Ports, which was a very, very valuable position, to his brother-in-law, who and he had given the presidency of Wales was up for grabs. And there's a point at which Oxford starts to write letters requesting the presidency of
Wales.
Yeah. Right. So I think that in their heads is this political maelstrom that Cecil was actually going to give the kingdom away upon the death of the Queen. Now, whether that's a rational conclusion or not, but they certainly saw the chess pieces being moved. At one point, they believed it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but they find out later, I think, that Robert Cecil is on the payroll of Spain.
Right. And exactly. Actually, Essex accuses him of that.
Yeah.
In his defense. And then Cecil's brother-in-law is called in. So
it sounds like Essex and his group, their problem was with the Cecils, not with the Queen so much.
Yeah.
With
sad.
The power behind
what happened is also on the Strand is Drury House. And they use Drury House in the next week after later, about 3 weeks after the Grey attack. And Grey was put in prison for about a month. And that wasn't enough for Southampton, but, he wasn't satisfied. But that did happen. But then she let him out. And around February 1st or 2nd, they started meeting in Drury House. Southampton took charge, and they planned a way to go to storm the palace at Whitehall and isolate Cecil and the guards over here and so on, so that Essex, at least Essex, I don't know of Southampton, but could get back and have a decent meeting with her one-on-one and just plead his case. I don't know what that case would be other than all of the reasons why he failed and what else he can do, but, and his loyalty. And of course he wanted the farmer of the sweet wines tax. He wanted that money. He wanted to live the life. He had to fire or let go 200 servants. I mean, he had 200 servants with his 42 bathrooms and probably a number of kitchens. So, that's high living. And I don't know how to compute it. But that was the plan. And I do think they wanted to deal with succession of some sort. They could have implored the Queen to go to Parliament and choose her own successor. And Cecil was sure that would be Robert Devereux, the Earl of Essex. He wanted to be king, and he wanted to persuade the Queen to make him king. There was a time when that might have been possible. I don't know legally if it would have been.
Speaking of legally here, somebody had passed me a note a moment ago. That article you referenced earlier about whether the Queen can pass off her own crown to somebody. The note I got says, please mention that's included in the new book Roger Strittmatter.
That Roger edited. Yes, I wanted to
Shakespeare
mention
and
that.
the Law from Amazon. So it's available
Exactly.
from there as well. So,
And I was so glad when he included that article. It was from 1982. So when you write something that really is good and provocative and continues to have relevance, you never know how long that's going to last, you know? That's really good.
yeah, it's out there again.
Alex, you have a question over there? You need
No,
a
I was just fiddling with my glasses, I think.
Well, you look thoughtful doing it. So do you have any thoughts on any of this? I mean, even going back the last half hour.
Well, it's just, as everybody said, there's a lot we don't know. What we do know, history has been written by the winners. There's an awful lot of stuff we're going to have to say, well, it could have been, it probably was, but we will never know for sure.
Exactly. And Robert Cecil is the winner of this whole game. And what happens after these few meetings at Drury House, where they can't make up their minds what to do? So there you go. You had a bunch of ragtag guys, and they have no idea. They've had this plan, that plan. Should they take over the tower as well? They had all this stuff. Finally, Cecil moves a pawn in order to provoke the war to go a different way. He sends a delegation. He first sends just a few and summons Essex to the palace to have a conference, to tell the Queen and tell Cecil and to, let's lay it out. What are you guys talking about? What's going on over there at Drury House and at Essex House? At which point Essex is sure that they want to bring him over there and kill him. This is the paranoia now has come up. So what does he do? He lets the word out through the city to all people that might be supportive of him. They're going to try to kill me. I need help, etc. And we got to do it immediately. They want me to come over in the morning, but I'm not going to do it. What is that morning? The 8th of February. And I might say that those who were involved and who were sent to the tower called themselves among each other Octavians. And the Octavian is the 8th.
Mhm.
So they memorialized it that way. So great crowd gathers at the courtyard of Essex House, which is backing up on the Thames, and the courtyard's the Strand is out there, and Essex is quite not knowing what to do. This is not exactly the way they had planned to go to Whitehall and isolate. You do that stealthily, maybe. But in this case, the great crowd was there, and Cecil moved again. He moved another piece. He sent a little delegation, 3 or 4 guys from the palace. They come over with a seal and everything else. And Essex hears somebody say, take them captive. He says, look, I'm going to go into the city and get some help. And meanwhile, put them in this room. John Davies, you keep guard, and I'll be back. I'll be back soon. So here he is. He's got this delegation from the palace. He's committing treason now. This is the gauntlet. And he's committed treason, and he dashes out to go get help. But what the followers there in the courtyard thought that he was going to go west to the palace. But he did not. He turned the other way and ran east. And instead, he went into the city toward St. Paul's to get the crowd that was listening to the sermon there on his side. And then beyond that, to go to get help from Sheriff Smith, one of many sheriffs in the city. And Smith had promised, according to a lot of people, 1,000 men armed in your service. So Smith had a house down farther than St. Paul's. So he gets to St. Paul's and nobody knows what's going on.
So it
By
sounds
the
like
time-
things were basically spinning out of control from the way
out
they
of
were
control.
planning.
The crowd doesn't
They're
know what's
having to
going on.
improvise and
Yeah. And Essex is shouting for the Queen, and people think, is he shouting to kill the Queen or what? And that doesn't materialize. And then he finally gets to Sheriff Smith's house. And instead of having 1,000 men, Sheriff Smith is sneaking out the back. He's disappearing. And eventually he comes back and says, I didn't have 1,000 men. And I don't know who told you that I did, but I didn't. And I was afraid of what you would think. And meanwhile, they just stopped. They set out food from the kitchen of Smith's house. And all the rabbles from Essex House sat at a big table outside and they had food. So how about that? Right in the middle of the whole rebellion, they're eating
having a snack.
sumptuous lunch. After that, Essex decides, I'm going to go back to my house, to Essex House, and I'm going to get people from that delegation, and I'm going to walk them over. We're going to take them prisoner. We're going to walk them to Whitehall. And at that point, the Queen will see me. We'll get rid of Cecil, push him out of the way, and we'll say what we have to say. And he goes back, gets himself back to Essex House. There's been a few shots fired somewhere. It's been a little chaos or a lot. And he is sweating again through his clothes. Goes back to Essex House. He's going to get that delegation that's been held prisoner from the palace. But John Davies has let them go. So now look at Essex. Everything he tries is failing. And he goes and they're gone. What can he do now? There's really nothing to be done. And they never get to Whitehall. They never do what some would have it in a movie. Like, they go and they erupt the whole thing, sort of like our January 6th here.
I've seen that in several movies as they go in there and they're surrounded and things like that. It's all made up.
It's all
we won't mention them. We just will,
I've seen several, yeah.
It's a better movie if they have them there, right?
But they never got there.
No, what happened was they had to surrender. And they didn't surrender till late that night. Southampton stood up on the roof and had a dialogue with the palace emissaries.
Yeah.
They were quite in charge. And Southampton was pretty, there are books and transcripts with his remarks.
Yeah, that speech that he did, that exchange is actually really remarkable exchange. If anyone, has an opportunity to read it, because when I read it, that's where I said I thought a lot of this was really about the rise of, certainly with the Cecils at the forepoint, but the rise of the meritocracy, the educated meritocracy that is actually pulling down the old aristocracy. And I see for me, this evening, tonight, this one night is the point at which, the ripcord comes out and the aristocracy definitely drops, even though it appears to still be in charge. I think this is the moment where the pendulum starts to swing.
I think
it's interesting to tie things back into Shakespeare and Oxford and all that. How Shakespeare seems to be so interested in the aristocracy side rather than the meritocracy, rising middle class.
I think to give Shakespeare credit, this is, first of all, we Oxfordians are convinced by a lot of evidence that the Earl of Oxford used Shakespeare as a pen name. So that we're talking Shakespeare, we're talking Oxford.
Of course.
Oxford was, in fact, as you say, he was a member of the old nobility, not just the aristocracy.
Yeah.
He was the top. And
suddenly it makes more sense.
What he was beyond Essex, beyond Southampton. He was, we have parallels like that today. Like my grandfather, my great grandfather would have had certain ideas that I don't have. Same with Earl of Oxford. He had standards that he put into the plays too. For example, he didn't necessarily believe James would be a good monarch. There was plenty of evidence that James was, not really a
And it proved to be correct.
scaredy cat, and so on and so forth. But Oxford, once to skip ahead, and once James was proclaimed and became the monarch, he wrote in a letter to Cecil, making sure he had himself on the record that we have a new king who in blood and whatever is right for the throne, and a perfect right. And he wrote those kind of things, not because he was just a yes man, but because he intensely believed in this form of government. There was no other.
And Hank, I think it shows out. One thing you can say about those letters that Oxford wrote is that he was absolutely prescient about the English Civil War that was only delayed by a few decades. It's like he saw it coming, but it wasn't James. It happened under James's son, Charles. So what he feared was this anarchy in the realm, because anarchy in the realm means that the Spanish will attack. Right. And that there must be a strong succession in England. Somebody has to take charge. We can spend another 2 or 3 hours talking about, how the sonnets play into this. But if you wouldn't mind just giving a little flavor of that.
Well, actually, before we even get into that, I hear murmurs around the room from different directions of people wanting to hear more about the interesting coincidence. Like, was it the day before the Globe was hired to put on Richard II? And why was nobody called in about that?
Nobody commented on that, right?
I want to talk about that if you'll let me.
Bonner, go Bonner.
Okay.
Go on, Bonner.
We'll back up just a second. After they met at Drury House in the week prior to the actual rebellion, of course, the day before the rebellion, which is a Saturday night, several of the people of the cronies of Essex, of course, went to the Globe to get the Lord Chamberlain's men to perform Richard II, and which, of course, dealt with the deposition of a monarch. It was going to be the thing that would rah-rah and get the people all worked up and fired up to want to rebel. But I want to point out one thing. It's been pointed out before, but I just love this. First of all, the venue that Saturday night is for the play is the Globe Theater, and we always hear this is Shakespeare's Globe. The troupe
This is the afternoon, Donna, right? The afternoon,
it's evening. Well, maybe it was an afternoon because they do go back and have dinner.
Sure.
They have dinner first. I forget.
Dinner's in the afternoon. Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
And then they go over and then they come back. The actual time frame isn't real clear in Robert Lacey's book, but at any rate. But then the second thing is, of course, the troupe of actors is the Lord Chamberlain's men. That's Shakespeare's company. This is beaten into our little heads. The third thing that the play is Richard II. That's Shakespeare's play. And last but not least, one of the prime mover and shaker is of the buddy of Essex is, of course, Southampton, and that's Shakespeare's patron. So we're Shakespeare.
Yeah, there you go.
In fact, none other than Robert Lacey, who's a very famous historian. He's one of the historical historians for the Crown. He's done a lot of wonderful writing. He's a great writer. But he says, well, Shakespeare was busy working on his play Troilus and Cressida.
They couldn't interrupt him to call him in about a rebellion.
Garbage out.
Perfect that the Earl of Oxford would write Richard II or revise it for this performance. That was really our founder, Looney, was sure that Southampton paid the players to put it on. Now, I don't know where he got that, but
here's another weird thing.
Doesn't look that way.
The day before the trial is going to, the rebellion is February 8th. The trial is going to be February 20th. On February the 19th, the Elizabeth people called in Augustine Phillips to talk to them about have, apparently they hadn't dotted that I and crossed that T. Why are you performing Richard II? But my question is, what are they doing talking to Augustine Phillips, one of the actors, if Shakespeare were around? And he's the one that said, oh, well, they were going to pay us 40. We were trying not to do it. I mean, he has this little setup that he's
obviously he wasn't around. He was around, but he wasn't other guy.
And for 40,
I don't even think was in the picture yet.
But, of course not.
After guy.
Of course you're right. But the funny thing about it, it's just a little cover story that Augustine Phillips has been to give. But you read it everywhere as if it's, maybe somebody out there is going to disagree with me. But Augustine Phillips said, well, they agreed to pay us 40 shillings more than we would take at the door if we performed the play. For 40 shillings, they risked their life because they surely had some clue. Even the actors are smart, right, Jonathan? They knew something was out there in the offing that could be really, really dangerous. And they could be rounded up and have not good, and have their life upended if they weren't actually killed. For 40 shillings? But that was just a cover story to get them off the hook, I think. And there's Alex, who takes good lawyerly look at everything. But I believe that was just a cover story because they had to cover that base. Oh, well, we got 40 shillings.
It's a good point. I wonder how the actors felt up there. They think the army was going to come any moment and arrest them. I don't know.
Another thing, and I looked for it this afternoon because I wanted to mention it, and I cannot find where I read it. But of course, we're going to get back to the trial, I guess, of Essex and Southampton.
Yeah, we better do that. We better get to the conclusion of all this and how it led.
This is significant to the Shakespeare.
The important thing about the trial is that Essex lost his head 6 days later.
Okay.
6 days.
I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
Oh, no. Well, I have something else to say. This actually leads back to your book. I have a second thing that's puzzled me forever because it's a question that historians they don't answer it. They don't really seem to understand it. But during this trial, they're trying Essex and Southampton together. They are both participating. They are both as guilty as they could possibly be of treason. They're both sentenced to death. And a week later, the sentence is carried out with Essex, of course, losing his handsome head. But Southampton is commuted to life. And there's a lot of lobbying for Southampton. But the question that historians don't answer is how in the world was Essex executed right away and Southampton spared? At this point,
right. Very briefly, my answer in the sonnets is that the sonnets are written and they're published not right away, but in 1609. And they do include, obviously, at least Sonnet 107 is when the Queen dies. That is universal among Shakespeare scholars. There's a couple of points of light that you can hold on to. But I regard it as the whole sonnets as containing and glancing away from, looking just like poetry about beautiful things and love and romance and this and that. And it's a chronicle history of Southampton. In the middle, 100, starting with the first night in the Tower, which was February 8th, the night of the 8th, all the way until the Queen's funeral and the envoy to Southampton. And in this, I've tried to sketch it out in my one book, The Living Record, and to make it more accessible or detailed in the monument, which I'm writing a second edition to, or at least, going over it, which is a masterful piece of work. Now, people don't have to they can scoff, but it's a masterful work. And I can tell you that his clues are there, and they almost shout out to you. What popular playwright writes, "My name be buried where my body is"? What universally revered playwright, even in his own time, writes, "I once gone to all the world must die"? To me, these are little clues that this book contains something more. And I know that he starts with the royal we from fairest creatures we, and this is a different era of Southampton's life when he's urging marriage and children and an heir of his own, even at age 19 or 20. We desire increase. Huh?
I just like to, for anyone who has ever wanted a way to understand the sonnets, I personally could not say enough wonderful things about Hank's book. Again, it's called The Living Record, Shakespeare's Succession and the Sonnets, but Hank will give a theory in that book that all 100 sonnets are to be read together. They are not individual pieces, just as you wouldn't pull a speech out of the middle of Macbeth and expect to understand the whole play. You can't take any individual sonnet out without understanding it. But Hank, you break down so beautifully in 3 sections in that book, the history that we've been discussing, the characters, more of real human beings, historical figures, but that appear, that are referred to in the sonnets, and the emotional angst of the poet as he watches all of this take place in which he personally is a participant.
And we must say that Oxford was called out of retirement, if you will. He was 10 years, for 10 years in the 90s. He's invisible. Shakespeare was out there by name, right, on the 2 dedications, and his name hyphenated began to be on the plays in 98. But Oxford was nowhere to be found. But he came out of retirement for that one day, February 19th, where the trial was held. And Essex and Southampton went on trial together for high treason, and Oxford sat as the highest ranking earl on the panel of peers that would act as the jury. So that ties Oxford back in to all of this. And
somehow that was something anomalous that he would come out for this. So obviously he and this were tied together, as you say.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He had to.
For some reason.
He had to be on the jury as a senior noble.
Now, I'd like to make a statement that I know you know what I've written and everything. I believe that in the sonnets is the answer to why we have a Shakespeare question. I believe that he details a deal with Cecil legally against myself. I forget, I don't have it memorized, but that he details for us how he sacrificed his identity. And that's why his name would be buried. That's why no one would remember me, not for certainly my work. Shakespeare will live, but not me. and a deal to not only get Southampton not executed, but liberated from the Tower, at which he was there for life. And then Oxford chose to leave this world one way or the other. We don't know how he died. We don't know where he was buried. We don't know a lot. But in 1604, which is the date that June 24th, we believe that he died. And that night, ironically, perhaps, the Earl of Southampton was arrested again and put in the Tower overnight, interrogated.
Weird coincidences.
Very odd.
Sheer coincidence. The excuse was the king was panicking.
As somebody said, whether you believe, about the Prince Tutor and all that, I heard somebody say over there, there was something weird about Southampton going on. And like they said, his shadow was bigger than it should have been. And
and look at it this way: the things that I'm talking about that are in the sonnets, that are in the history here, in the late history, that have to do with legalities and the succession, and how Southampton got out. Why spared? He was going to, he was at first going to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. Then they were going to, chop his head off. Well, others then want me to start way back at the beginning as to who could have impregnated whom, and all of this other stuff going on. And by the time you get, and are the sonnets bisexual or are they homosexual? All of that stuff, which I don't believe is the way to start. The way to start is to look at the words. You know, there are hundreds of legal terms in the sonnets, hundreds. And the sonnets, the words in there tell you that this is a chronicle history of Henry IX. And guess what? When he's let out of the tower, Sonnet 106 is the last night in the tower. Sonnet 105, we three never kept seat in one. Kept seat is on the throne. And that's a whole royal aspect. But 106 is the chronicle history of the guy that Oxford felt should be the next king. Henry Wriothesley, Henry IX of England. But what is it? The chronicle, when in the chronicle of wasted time. And there's an echo there of Richard II, I guess it is. I wasted time and time wasted me. You know, time and succession, they're all tied for Oxford. And nothing was more important to him than the having good people, the right leader, and to do it in the right way. Now, I don't know how you would think everything could be so fortunate. The member of the royal family and all this stuff. But the point is that Oxford wanted to play by the rules and to have a future of England that's not divided by civil war. And
you said we could go into that whole background, but we have like 30 seconds to do it, so we won't.
Yeah,
so, wrap up, guys. It's gone.
I don't know what else to say here, except
that was brilliant, Hank. That was brilliant. Thank you.
I just feel that the answer is in those sonnets, and that I try to explain, and I'll probably continue to do that as long as I can walk and talk.
Literature can be a historical primary source.
Any thoughts from anyone else? Oh, sorry. Repeat, Dorothea.
Oh, I said literature. Works of literature can be original primary historical sources.
That's a very important point. And
you write what you experience. Yes.
So this may be a little slice of history as written by the losers.
I think it might very well be, Alex.
Right.
Yeah.
Shakespeare's sonnets written by the losers.
Wow.
I'm hearing a lot of feedback here saying, will Hank return? How about part 2? Hank. Somebody even says. So we'll need you back at some point, Hank.
I look forward to that.
We need to wrap up. I'm sorry, everyone. This is so interesting, but thank you again for everyone. Thank you, Bonner, Alex, Dorothea, and Hank, especially tonight.
Thanks for inviting me back to the tavern.
Oh, it was lovely.
Fun. Okay.
And everyone, thank you so much again. And you YouTube viewers in our future too. Hi. So, you came to help with the dishes and clean up, huh? We've got a lot of stuff here. And you're not here to volunteer to help. But you want to learn more about how you can support the Blue Boar Tavern. Okay, that is good. The best way is there's a like and subscribe button there by the door. So on your way out, just be sure to press those. Another thing you can do is you can actually go to our website, the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship.org, and that will show you tons of new information, things you may not know, whether you're a brand new person, have been with us for years, essays, video links, past Blue Boar Tavern episodes. It's all there. If you're not a member already, you can sign up. If you're not ready to sign up, at least get on our email list to get all the latest email news from the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship. And that will include monthly links to the Blue Boar Tavern, so you can participate live by passing us notes and asking us questions and generally joining in. So thanks for joining us. I better get to work. There's a lot of dishes back there. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Like and subscribe. Bye-bye.